Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by vocalist and coffee expert Anthony Auger. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! Well, what's going on, Caffeinated crew? Today I'm joined by somebody that I have been wanting to talk to for a while. He's been a part of the specialty coffee industry for a few years. His name is Tony. Tony, how's it going?
Good. How's it going with you, man?
It's great. Super stoked, both on your music experience and your green coffee and just coffee industry experience in general. Let's first talk about what we're drinking. How about that?
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
What are you drinking today?
Well, I'm actually at a little family reunion this weekend, so I brought Goshen's crowd pleaser. So it's called Bona Fide. It's probably 90% of what we roast. And the first thing I want it to taste like is coffee, but then after that, I try to sneak in some more subtle, interesting things. That way, even at a diner, someone could take a sip of it and be not expecting to say, "Whoa, what is this?" Type of thing. So yeah, whenever I'm at a big family thing, that's the one I bring with me. It's just a solid medium roast that tastes like chocolate and a little bit of fruit in there.
Yep. That's I think a lot of people doing collaborations, especially bands, they've been going towards that diner cozy with a little bit, even the Cancer Bats blend that I have is very much that.
That's awesome.
So that's very exciting. Your mind doesn't need to be blown by coffee complexities every cup,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. My philosophy is when it comes to coffee is I'm always trying to think where I'm going to drink it. Right. And that plays a huge aspect. Even when I'm making seasonal blends and things like that, right now we just rolled out our summer seasonal blend. And I'm when I was constructing the flavor profile, I'm I literally want a coffee that if made as cold brew, you can be out drinking, mowing your lawn, and it tastes like an Arnold Palmer. You know what I mean? That's what I want. And same thing with our spring blend. It's really floral but fruity, and I'm I want this hot cup of coffee on a cool spring morning, and maybe I'm out working in the garden type of thing. So always thinking that, because it's for me the coffee is just so experiential. You know what I mean? We want to make sure that not only is it taste cool, but it's it elevates what you're doing at that time.
Right. Yeah, that is, I think, such an important aspect is the experience, associating even the taste and smell with memories or where you are when you're drinking it.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. So I love that mentality.
Yeah, man.
Instead of just getting lost in the sauce of,
right.
Washed Columbian geisha with citrus and yuzu. That's a great coffee, but
right.
Today I have a coffee that is special to me because my brother brought it last weekend from Cleveland. It's Rising Star.
Yeah, those guys are awesome.
Yeah, so I love it's my favorite Cleveland shop. I always go by that little firehouse location that they have.
Yeah.
And he brought me their Pink Bourbon Creation, which is from Columbia. It's washed, and it has apple butter taste. Super weird.
Awesome.
Yeah, so a little bit of berry, apple, jasmine.
Is that from one producer?
Yeah, it says it's from Tolima. I don't know if it's a micro lot or if it is a single producer, but
it's funny. I used to sell coffee to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I worked for a mainly Columbian place, and I'm I wonder if their new rep sold it to them.
Was that with Caravella?
Yeah. So when I worked with that company, they specialize in. Well, I started in Colombia, but took. Honestly, they really started the whole micro lot scene in Colombia 20 years ago, and then they took that model where you're basically tasting every single thing a producer makes and making sure they're kept separate. And they took that model all across Latin America. And so it was really fun to work for them because I got to see like how different Mexico is in comparison to Colombia or Peru,
I know that Colombia especially has been like an established coffee growing market, of course, for 100 years. But
for sure,
seeing a lot of like these micro lots coming out, especially like Costa Rica now, where they're like, my friend has one that's like, what is it? It's an anaerobic Costa Rican, and it's one of the strangest coffees I've ever tasted. But
right.
It's just crazy to see how coffee has changed, even from me working in counterculture and being like, this is what an Ethiopian tastes like to now.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think, the interesting thing about like all these different regions and like where they're at is so like, honestly, I always tell people like being able to understand like the economics of a region and the oppression of a region, like really helps you be able to understand like why, let's just say Costa Rica is like, they're killing it when it comes to processing, right? Because they actually have more capital, like in Latin America, them and Panama, like their economies are pretty damn good. And so, they're able to like have these larger scale farms that have a lot of inherent wealth behind them. And so for them, it's like, yeah, screw it. Like I'll waste 50 bags to see if this coffee works, whereas a lot of the producers that like I try to work with and like through Caravella as well, like they're just growing on, maybe 2 hectares of land, and they're terrified of trying anything different because if they ruin their crop that year, like that's it, they're out of everything. And so like, it's been this awesome experience to like first use like people from that area on the ground that can like understand the social scene of their community, and then try to show them like, hey, let's just make really good washed coffee first, right? And that way what you're doing, and then we can start messing around with these different processing methods. And so it's cool to see Colombia, like they're taking off now, like they got it down. But like even areas in like Peru, like it's so hard to convince, someone from, those regions to be like, no, 5 bags. That's all we want to do is 5 bags. And we just want you to ferment like 5 minutes longer. You know what I mean? And they're like, I don't know. I really need that money.
Yeah. And I know that, a lot of your experiences in green coffee buying, and you've done quite a bit of traveling to fincas as well, haven't you?
Yeah. That was really part of my last job. Yeah.
So that's like something like a dream for me. I would love to go, I don't know, just see how they make it. Like,
right.
Bringing up the whole idea of like economics and like the global economies and things like that. I know green coffee judging is something that you're proficient in as well. Is that something that you learn like kind of on the ground, or is that something that's taught through importers or through the SCA specifically, Specialty Coffee Association?
Yeah, it's a hard thing, man. That's I guess, I don't know. For me, it was like I'm very much like a rabbit hole person, right? Like once I start something and find something I love, like I just become like way too obsessed with it, right? And so the hardest part about learning how to taste and evaluate coffee is that you literally have to build like this mental library that is, because every time you taste and grade a coffee, I mean, you're not grading it based on like what's on the table that day, but you are comparing and contrasting against every coffee you've ever tasted, right? And so first you have to start building this mental library of like, okay, well, generally this is what Brazil's taste like, and the Brazil that like I know is an 84 point Brazil. Like I'm going to compare every single like 84 point. I mean, Brazil I'm tasting to that. But it's really like, I think it took me maybe 5 years to feel comfortable enough to like start training to take my Q grader test. And so if like those who don't know what like a Q grader is, it's essentially like the sommelier of the coffee world. But honestly, I think it's way more difficult. You know, the one thing I always like brag about is that, you know, in wine, they have like maybe like 100 different like flavor compounds they've been able to kind of isolate and talk about. But in coffee, we have like over 500, right? And in addition to like how different it is, like the bitter level of coffee, like just inherently bitter, like kind of like dryingness. I mean, it's huge. It's like 90% of the flavor. So you really have to learn how to like remove that aspect and just taste what's underneath it, you know? And so that was like the really hard part, right? And the only way you can ever do that is by not just tasting one coffee at a time, right? So you have to be able to, I don't know, put like at least 5 different coffees on a table, even if they're from the same micro region. That way you can start like picking apart them. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And I realized like really early on that like there are things called super tasters. And it's like, if you look on the back of your tongue, this won't ever be videotaped, right? I can show you my tongue.
You can show me my tongue.
Great.
Yeah, your tongue. Yeah.
Okay. So like in the far back of your tongue, if you have like really big taste buds, that's what classifies someone as a super taster. And so like, it's so bad for me that if like I taste the tiniest bit of like a defect, like I'm gagging, you know what I mean? Like I'm literally like, I like on a silent table, I have to like and walk away no one knows how bad the coffee is. But like, you know, and it's just, honestly, it's so much fun to me. And that's my favorite part about the job, is like building that mental library every day over and over again.
Yeah, the rabbit hole concept is very close to home, because that's kind of what happens. And then finding my friends that are rabbit hole people too. It's like, hey, have you tried this natural Ethiopian? And like, natural? What is that?
What's that? Right.
What's a P60? And it's like, oh God, they're buying $200 grinders and
right.
Like, so it's great. So yeah, so when it comes to the green buying and green tasting and things, like that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like, I don't know anybody that does that. So it's like, how do you even, so when you're tasting these coffees, do you brew it kind of like a cupping, but in its green form, or is it like a sample roast?
Yeah. So what starts I mean, if you don't have like a lot of vendors you trust, which one thing I would highly recommend if someone wants to learn more about this, like go to coffee events and find suppliers. Mm-hmm. And you don't even have to buy coffee from them, but just start making those connections. Because you literally never know like when that person is going to be in a different job that could like transform what you do, you know? And so, yeah. So one is like social networking is huge. And the cool thing about coffee is like, as you're aware of, there's a lot of people that are into the music scene. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you can make those connections over that. But then like, once you trust them really well and show that you know how they taste, and you can actually like calibrate with those people, they know like, I'm not going to send them a coffee that they're going to reject. Like it's like going to waste everybody's time. So the first things first is like, that's super important. And then when somebody sends me coffee, like I normally don't do like a massive green grading type of thing, where that's also like part of your Q grader exam is you put out like 500 grams of coffee and you're sorting through to find out like how many physical defects you can find. And that will play a huge aspect of like the feedback you give to somebody. But then like after that, how I like to operate is I'll do, I have like a very basic sample roast profile. And luckily I've been able to have like an Ikawa. I don't know if you've seen those before.
Yeah.
They're awesome because like you can make a roast profile on your phone and send it directly to the machine. And so like a lot of times what I'll do is actually, have a couple different roast profiles, on that machine. And they're based on, you know, like I know most Columbians roast this way, you know what I mean? Or, A big thing that we're learning more about right now is like called water activity inside coffee. And that's like how much moisture is still trapped inside that coffee by the time the green coffee, by the time it arrives to me. And so I can then be able to say like, okay, I know most coffees with maybe 0.56 water activity, they taste best if I roast them this way. And so on the cupping table, I'm trying to make no difference in the roast at all, right? So that way I can put them all next to each other and know it's not my roast profile. And for me, like actually just cupping is incredibly important because again, like that removes every variable possible, right? And so, yeah, so that's the first step, right? And so then when I put stuff on a table, like, and I'm tasting like 6 different options for a Columbian blender, I know it's not because I roasted one too dark or one roasted too fast or anything like that.
It seems so complex, I know, but doing it over time, it can.
Oh yeah, for sure.
but yeah, it's so intriguing to me, and I hope it's intriguing to people listening because this is like such an important part of if you're into specialty coffee, like knowing the steps to get from where it's grown to roasting and then to,
Totally.
In the cup. Like,
yeah,
I think it's important to recognize how much work goes in all through the chain, how many hands touch it.
For sure.
And like how many skill sets it takes to make a great cup of coffee.
I mean, I always tell that to people, man. Like that's the one thing whenever somebody is like, whoa, your bag of coffee costs like $16, like, which is still not that expensive.
That's pretty low, yeah.
But it's like, but I tell them like, you have no idea for everybody across the supply chain. I mean, before it even ships from origin, like there's at least 20 people that have to touch that coffee, right? And every single one of them needs to make more than just a living wage. You know, they need to make a wage where they can grow their family. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you really are complaining about like a couple dollars, like a couple dollars goes so long at where coffee's grown, you know?
Yeah. And I tell people all the time when they complain, it's like, you know, if a coffee costs $5 as opposed to $3, you're not going to feel that. Like, but that could make, like you said, a world of difference to somebody in Peru or Colombia. Like, you don't know that. So yeah, it's super important. Kind of transitioning to your experience with Goshen. You've been there since 2021.
Yeah.
As the Chief Coffee Officer. I love that title. So what does your day-to-day kind of look like? I know you just did a rebrand, which is looking really, really cool. And I actually...
Oh, thanks.
I had James from Black Crown Initiate. He's in that. He's kind of close to the St. Louis area. And so he's been buying bags.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm super happy that I've been able to even go buy coffee from Goshen.
Yeah.
So what is your day-to-day like as Chief Coffee Officer of Goshen?
Dude, it's a little too much right now. Man, it's all the stuff I was just talking about. Yeah. But it's also for a few months it had been all the roasting. Mm-hmm. I also worked on our websites over the past couple of years, the unrebranded and the new rebranded website. I don't know, training, like it's kind of all encompassing. And really the biggest reason is like, even though this company has been around for 20 years, when I joined, we essentially looked at everything and we're like, nope, we're going to be a startup company. And at the same time, me and a new CEO hopped on at January 1st at 2021. Mm-hmm. The very first thing I was like, okay, guys, I've sent out before I started to like 200 people, a little like survey all across the US and people I've known from the industry, just to show you how bad the branding is, right? Mm-hmm. So, because I could come in and make awesome coffee, I'm confident on that, but like, if it looks like shit on the shelves, no one's going to buy it, And so that was like that took like, honestly, like it took 8 months or so just because we hired like one company, and at the end of it, we were like, this is awful. I don't know how it happened. That was a big waste of money. But then, luckily we worked with someone in town who, they were going to charge us more initially. And we were like, do we save $10,000? And like, we would have saved a lot more money if we went with them initially. And they crushed it, man. It was one of those things where, we went in and we told them all of our feelings about coffee and what we want to do. And they were like, boom, we know how to do this for you. Mm-hmm. We got it. Cause we're not, we're not professionals in that field, So that was a huge part of my job for the first year. But also, very luckily when I hopped in, there weren't any COGS, so cost of goods. And also there was zero relationship. So they were at the point where they had like one supplier, and every time they needed coffee, they're like, hey, I need coffee. What do you suggest? And so for me, the biggest thing I wanted to do was build a supply chain through the relationships that I've met over my years in the industry, and really just let them know that my plan was to really focus like economically in the regions I want to work with. Initially, I was like, my plan is I want to make sure that every single coffee I buy, except for Brazil, is at minimum 10% above like what fair trade prices are, right? Fair trade's bullshit. So people still don't get paid even living wages on fair trade. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really easy, they've done a great job with being able to say like, slap a sticker on something and make people feel good. And I kind of wanted to find a way to just like very quickly tell the consumers like, no, this is better than fair trade type of thing, and giving that arbitrary 10% where most of what we're actually buying is well above 10% fair trade pricing. So yeah, that was huge. But now I'm at the point where most of it is actually ensuring there's quality there, right? Mm-hmm. And to do that, you have to not only like put your samples from importers and exporters like under a microscope, but you have to start making these long-term commitments, right? And so Guatemala is one that like I've decided I really want to focus on Guatemala, mainly because like up until now, a lot of Guatemalan coffees kind of sucked. And really it's due to again, their economic situation and milling infrastructure. And so working with my friends over at Caravella to prospect like regions and groups of producers that are willing to make those changes, like I kind of hinted at before, and then buying the large majority of my coffee through them, right? So mm-hmm. in that Bona Fide blend, I was saying it's 60% Guatemala, so like that's one I'm like always being like putting under a microscope and giving like constant feedback to kind of create these regions and find like prospect producers that if I start investing in, like maybe they can grow their own or like develop their own milling infrastructure and start working with the producers around them, knowing that this is a very trustworthy person. Mm-hmm. So that's probably like, I don't know, maybe 50%, 20%, somewhere around there of my job now. I took on roasting for a little bit, the machine I have right now, I'll show you, I'll send you a video of it. It's a fucking monster. It was built in a garage like 20 years ago. And it like operates on something that looks like a jet flame engine, and it's a nightmare. But yeah, so moving into, our Loring just arrived, and that was really big for me, knowing that like my utilities are now going to be like 10% of what they were before. Mm-hmm. And also having a lot more control. Right. So I've been spending a lot of time like doing what I can with this monster of a machine to making the roast profiles get to where I want them to go. So it's an easy transfer into the new machine. But then there's sales. Like I have to do some sales stuff. That's a lot of my job. I don't know, man. It's everything. That's why it says chief coffee officer, because, COO didn't really explain just how much I was doing for the coffee type of thing,
So the machine is custom built is what you just said.
Yeah. It right now. So it has, it's an air roaster. It was built in someone's garage. It like literally when I say jet engine, you're going to be like, that's a jet engine. and it's an air roaster. So it's just a lot of heat going into that machine. Mm-hmm. And with most air roasters, there's just an on off switch. That's it. And so with the amount of like trial and error I'd be able to do and crazy shit like, okay, during this part of the roast, I'm going to have to run over to the door that goes to the outside and swing that door open to create a cooler airflow type of thing in the room. And or I'll like, if I turn the cooling fan on at this time, it's going to change the way the roast operates, Mm-hmm. So it's been a lot of like literally running around in circles around this machine just to try to do remotely what I want to do with a roast profile. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy that you have a lowering on the way.
Arrived. It's about to be set up. So
just for your your personal like mental health.
Right. Right. Well, and it's a cool machine because it's like anybody can do it. It's you program your profiles. Someone just needs to make sure the machine doesn't blow up.
Right.
And but yeah, for me, it's like that is killer because anybody can do it. Right. Mm-hmm. The barrier into roasting has always been something that I feel is like really unfair. Just because it's this like glorified role in the industry. But it's not that fun. It really isn't that fun. And so for me, like I wanted to, like our whole team, I want them all to roast, right? But I also want our whole team to package. I also want our whole team to make sure that like we have the correct inventory, because for me, like those jobs may be even more important than roasting. Because they're for us the last step to getting something out the door,
Right. Yes. What you're saying about the roasting, it being kind of mystified.
Right.
It's pretty funny. I've been learning recently on it's like a 20-pound topper.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit more involved than a lowering, but
yes, still a lot more involved. Yeah. Sure. You got to think of it long term, man. It's like think of the man hours. Think of like the mental stress it is for a machine that's like so labor intensive, Mm-hmm. But like you have a machine that it's like the best of both worlds. It's actually way more economically affordable if you think like, man, over the course of a year, like I don't have to pay someone $25 an hour to sit there and go crazy, Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm always thinking long term and what's gonna like even just like I don't know, like exhaust wise and pollution wise, like what's going to be better for the world going forward.
Yeah, definitely making coffee sustainable is like top priority, I think, right now for the industry.
Oh, for sure. It's not going to survive if we don't.
Exactly. And we can get into a conversation about climate change, but we'll save that for another day. Because that will take another hour and a half, I think.
Right. For sure. For sure.
So let's talk about some music. I know that you've been a vocalist for a long time, coming from that Boston, Merrimack area. For me, that is an extremely important kind of area because Have Heart and, Verse and bands like that.
For sure.
Melodic hardcore was, especially straight edge melodic hardcore was like
right.
Something super, I was super into in the early 2000s and still am, even though I'm not straight edge, but
right.
You were in the effort for a while. What was it like being in that scene when it's thriving? Because I'm, 1,000 miles away in the Southeast and it's having an impact there. So I can only imagine what it was like as it's booming.
Right. Man, it's I was thinking about that this morning, even just like, because I knew you'd probably ask about it, but like honestly, the whole thing was way like to a certain extent, we didn't know what was going on. You know what I mean? Like we, like a lot of us in that scene, like, I mean, we were going to like middle school together, you know? In middle school, I had, my best friends were like Dan Heselton of Guns Up and Sean McKendry, who founded Shipwreck. Like, you know, like we were buds, and we grew up in punk rock. You know, we weren't even into hard. We didn't even know there was a difference, right? Like I remember this one show we went to, I only wanted to go because Bad Brains was playing. Like it was, and excuse me, Soul Brains were playing. And then like, it was like, this is fucking cool. Like, let's go see them. And, but at the same time, like, you know, I love that band Panic. And I, you know, really went, and I like Cro-Mags too. And Cro-Mags was actually playing that show. It was a big like festival where they had like up and down. Yeah, it was awesome. And so I went, and it was actually Panic's first show. So I got their tape there, and I was like, this is a great band. But that's because I loved fast punk rock. Right. And I had no idea there was a difference. And then I saw American Nightmare play at that same show.
Oh yeah.
And that was the first time where I was like, whoa, hardcore is something different. Like I had no idea, because like I was used to punk rock, like kind of pits where we're just going everywhere, throwing people around, having a fun time. But like, you know, a normal like two-step part happened in one of their songs, and it was like rows of kids two-stepping, like in perfect, like, you know, like, and I was like, what the fuck? How do they all know to do this? And like half the dudes had like straight edge tramp stamps, and like, you know what I mean? It was like really weird. And so, but at the time I still didn't know it was hardcore. Right. And to me, it was all punk rock. And that was when I was in high school. And so like really once high school started, like we all went to different high schools at that point. And we, you know, we were starting to branch off, right? Like I wanted to still keep doing more punk rock stuff. And those guys started like writing like hardcore music at that point. You know, it took a few years for us to kind of all meet back together, you know? Like that's when like, you know, Guns Up had started taking off. And it was funny because like we were all like, yeah, Dan, you guys are making like the new No Warning for us. Thanks. Like this is cool, you know? This is great. We get to pretend they're playing still. You know, we would play these shows together, and all these shows together in that area. I mean, because we had Cave In, we had Piebald, and like those bands were all playing together, and not a lot of us knew a difference, right? And so I think that's why like the melodic hardcore era really took off, because we were tapping into all these different like influences that weren't just like, I don't know, fast two-step breakdown, you know? Eventually, like I was like, man, I want to hang out with my friends in the hardcore scene more. And, you know, me and some buds that had like played in other bands together at that time, we were like, we should just make a hardcore band that like will allow us to play hardcore shows, you know? And we're like, yeah, that sounds cool. And so, you know, like we started playing shows with Verse and like Eric from Verse, like, you know, and those guys were awesome. We loved hanging out with them. We, you know, started playing more shows with Have Heart and Shipwreck and I love Soul Control. Those dudes are my buds, but like, you know, they played their first show, and those assholes like jumped right in after us. You guys, like, you guys just outshone us. Yeah. God damn it. And it's your first show, you know? So it was a lot of fun. And it was going back and forth between like Merrimack Valley and Rhode Island and Boston. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like we had no idea how lucky we were at that point.
Yeah. It's always so weird watching, especially like I watched the Bane, the documentary. I can't remember. It's like, holding
this moment or something.
Holding these moments.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like watching that and just seeing like, you know, we started going to hardcore shows, and it's all these bands that are like, you know, bands that I looked up to, or, you know, 10, 15 years later, you know, we're looking up to, and it's like,
yeah,
what happened? Like, what was happening to make everybody want to start a hardcore band? So it's so crazy because, and it's not even like it's, you know, Worcester is not a huge place. Boston's not even that big of a city, and it's just I think it was it was like the moment, you know.
Yeah, it really was, and that's what you know. That's the cool thing about just even New England in general. You drive 2 hours and you're in a different scene, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, man, the amount of times I saw Bane growing up, like, I'm so lucky. And every album that came out, we were like, yeah, this is better than the last one. Hell yeah. Like, it was, yeah, for sure. Like, I didn't realize how lucky I was until I moved out to the Midwest. For sure. It's a long, you have to drive a long way to get to a good show in the Midwest.
Yeah, of course. Which is weird because the Midwest hardcore is like very, very specific, but good. Yeah. Like there's a lot of amazing bands, but
for sure, man. When we started like touring, and we met some of the bands out there, we were like, fuck yeah, you guys are raw as fuck.
Yeah. They're so angry too. They're just filled with rage. It's amazing.
For sure. I get it. If I was a teenager in the Midwest, I would have hated it.
Yeah. It's corn-fed, nothing to do.
Oh yeah, those dudes are all huge too.
Yeah,
like so this little scrawny New England kid came out. I'm like everybody. I'm like looking up at
the scrawny New Englanders with their melodic, like, you know, right. All the Midwest stuff was like very heavy and like rhythmic.
Right.
It's like, so show some emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's what I love so much. Even like these festivals, like This Is Hardcore, where it'll be like, you know, an almost grunge revival band playing with something like Pain of Truth, which is some of the most violent hardcore out right now.
For sure.
That's what I love about hardcore in general is like, the effort can write, you know, hardcore, but with a lot of nice, like melodic, and then they'll play with, you know, I don't know, Brace War or something. And it's
right.
And people are into it. Right. Like the same people that are into those two bands. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have so much love for hardcore in general, but especially that era where it was like things were just going crazy.
Yep.
And you're currently playing with Modernman. Mm-hmm. Y'all released a 20-song album.
Well, honestly, we're just now. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and we're just now getting back together to start like. We called up the place to record it. We're like, do you still have the masters? Like, we might want to try to mix it and redo some of the vocals on it. And the guy's like, what?
So y'all are kind of rewriting?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we got to the point where like all of us had young kids around. Mm-hmm. And it just became harder and harder to get together during that time. But like my oldest is going into a sophomore year, and you know, like all of the kids are now at the point where they don't want to hang out with us as much. So we're like, okay, cool, let's start getting together again and play.
Yeah, I'm loving that now that, you know, because I'm hitting 30 and I feel like I'm just now able to spend time writing music and enjoy it again.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people that have had kids, they kind of took a break, but now they're able to tour again because the kids are getting older. So for sure. I'm pretty stoked as getting up there that I might be seeing some bands that I
right definitely,
like we have too much going on right now, and now the pandemic was like we should do it again.
Dude, exactly.
Yeah,
we were all so fucking bored during the pandemic. Like you have no idea how many bands, like band playlists we had, like me and my friends made, like, maybe we should do a band like this, maybe we should do a band like that. And now we're all like, all right, let's fucking do it.
Yeah, now that life is back and we're so busy again, it's like I can jam 4 times a week.
That's awesome. I'm still only down to 1.
I can be in 4 bands at once. But yeah, I really love that. I was listening to the Modernman stuff yesterday, and like revisiting it, and it feels really cool because it is the hardcore punk, so I can tell your punk rock influences. And I feel like if you brought that today, it would fill like kind of a void that we don't have. There's maybe a few bands that are doing that sound. So Please.
Yeah, yeah, man. I
Please
mean,
do
honestly,
it.
like it's almost like the show I told you, the first show I went to, where we're like, we're like the guy who plays guitar. He played in this band called Scream for Silence, and they were like one of the bigger St. Louis bands that had come out. But they were like metalcore. They played in the '90s. It was great metalcore. But like I was like, man, you know what? Like, I just really I can't stop listening to Dead Kennedys. I can't. Like it's one of my favorite bands still, and like. Or like Off when they came out, I was like, yeah, you guys know what to do.
Yeah,
you figured it out. Like, let's do this. So that's like the big part of it. And honestly, we're at the point now, like since we even do have kids, we're just like, this is a great excuse to hang out with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if we can find a basement show that like some kids like throw each other around, even better.
Is there, cause here I'm having trouble finding all ages scene because it's mostly car shows. So if y'all are actually able, like, I think it's very important
for sure.
Because without, like people under 18, there is no hardcore scene.
Oh, not at all.
So yeah.
Well, we have like really, in St. Louis, we have like incredibly lax like alcohol laws because like Budweiser is from here. So like, I mean, even to the point where like your passenger can drink and you can't in a car. So like there's a lot of places where they'll do all ages. Like I just took my oldest daughter to her first hardcore punk rock show, and it was at a bar and no one cared type of thing. So it was like after 9 at night.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
we're luck out in that way.
That's nice. Yeah, here. I mean, you could probably get away with it, but still, it's
right.
Have 14-year-olds coming into the bar, like
right.
But yeah, I love that you're trying to get it going. Would love to see some new Modernman. Even the effort, like I love that so much. Like
thanks, man.
The Iconoclasm album.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, I've been listening to it so much. It's so good.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
I know it's from when I was in high school, but
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
makes me nostalgic in a way. But I've really enjoyed talking to you. I love the coffee talk so much. And thank you so much for, sharing everything that you do.
Of course, man.
It's been a lot of fun. I have one last question for you before we
Yeah.
What's your favorite city for beans and breakdowns?
Guatemala City.
Yo, that's a deep cut.
That is. That was some of the craziest shows we ever played. And it's actually where I fell in love with coffee. So that has to be there.
What a flex. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm jealous of that answer because I haven't been to Guatemala yet, but soon I will be. But yeah, man, that's sick. I have nothing else to say to that. Well, Tony, thanks so much for hanging out. I hope you enjoy the rest of your family reunion, and have a great Sunday.
Thanks, man. You too. Hopefully get some more coffee in you.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. See you, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Tony for hanging out on the podcast and sharing his wealth of knowledge about the coffee industry with us. Check out The Effort as well as Modernman. The Effort is streaming everywhere on every listening platform. Modernman's album can be found on Bandcamp. Also check out Goshen Coffee's newly rebranded website and pick up some coffee if you're able to. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can find out more information about the podcast by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns or on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up!